point of view, that the Germans are more capable of thinking about the affairs of the state seriously and taking it seriously. So it's a huge difference, for instance, during the German and the French Enlightenment. The French Enlightenment was tending to be more radical because it was very little chance of getting a job for the administration in Paris, whereas in German you had very many opportunities to make up a life for yourself, working for some local government, for instance Weimar or Sachsen-Anhalt or Hessen-Darmstadt and so on. So you had no need to be radicalized, at least no personal grounds for radicalization. Of course, the Germans were praised for the Autobahnen, that is the high-speed roads, so the expressways and so on. But it's really an Italian invention, but the Germans' Italian invention during the time of Mussolini. The autostrade was an Italian invention. The Germans have copied it and perfected it, and then the Eisenhower seeing it in Europe during World War II also adopted it in the States. So it's really a German thing, but also in the same time it's more or less German thing, not exactly. Of course, the good German cars, that the retired people are doing pretty well, but this is the stereotype, and also partly true, of course, in a huge extent to the true that they are doing pretty well in all the Western Europe, not only Germany, but it was named. Wurst and beer, of course, yes, and they were named too. The German cuisine, which is a typical northern cuisine, giving much energy. It's concentrated on giving much energy, like the ploughman's lunch in London, and the good big English breakfast. So much energy, cold climate, and against this cold climate, much calories. Pragmatism. With pragmatism it's more complicated, because pragmatism was named by my students as something typically German. I would be a little bit hesitating to agree with this notion, because for instance the pragmatism itself as the way of philosophical thinking was invented by William James, but he mainly constructed it on the basis of the empiric thinking of David Hume and strictly rational thinking of Descartes. Philosophically, pragmatism is American, not German, but when we are speaking about pragmatism in more common, from a more common approach, then we can state that from time to time, for instance, in politics, you have a pragmatical approach. And sometimes you have ideological approach. For instance, when you take Germany, you have the Realpolitik eras, but now you have more ideological, maybe even idealistic, maybe crazy idealistic, for instance, attitude towards illegal immigrants from Muslim countries, for instance. This is clearly an example of idealistic thinking. And at the same time, you have the same, for instance, in the United States, you have the Wilsonian thought that is very much idealistic, and the Americans generally combine their own national interests with the idealistic approach towards, for instance, freeing the Kurds, which had been slaughtered by Saddam Hussein. But also they were thinking about their national interests. Techno and music in general, yes, Germans have been concentrating on music for a long time because there were so many local dialects and languages and accents, so it was a little bit problematic. So they were mostly using French language. For instance, for the aristocrats, it was common to use French language to communicate with the other aristocrats for another German states during, for instance, the 17th and 18th centuries. The bourgeois, the highly educated men, would use the literary German, and the other were using dialects. So it was a very clear tendency to use some international languages instead of German, to a huge extent, French and then English. and to some extent in the northern Germany, English was very popular already in the 18th century in Hamburg and Bremen and so on. So when it was a joke when about this overgrowth of music in the German culture. For instance, there's a father and